All right, so welcome everybody to Edible Gifts for Christmas. I sometimes call it Edible Crafts and Gifts. And how I got involved in this is that I hate shopping. I just hate shopping for anything other than plants. And then I thought, well, what can I do out of my own garden and all my ingenuity to make gifts instead of going to the malls? In fact, I take pride these days that if I don't go to a mall during the Christmas season, I'm extremely happy. All right? So that's always my goal. All right? Yeah, I might go to the odd side mall, if you know what I mean, but not the main malls. Chinook Center and South Center does not know me. So my first question then is, why edible gifts? Why should we do edible gifts? And for me, it's one way of extending my gardening season, all right, because I'm using sometimes stuff that I've grown, so I'm bringing it forward into a next season. I'm not actually actively growing it most of the time, but at least I'm working with something that I've grown. And the other piece of it for me is I want to create my own traditions. I remember the traditions when I was a child with my mum, and we would start the Christmas cake in September, and every week you'd add a little bit more rum, and a little bit more this, and at the end, you didn't need to have any wine for supper, you just had a piece of cake. So, so you want to create your own new traditions. So that's another reason why I do it. And the other one is the gifts for the impossible to buy. Who here has got one of those? At least one of those, right? So what better than to do something that is an edible gift, because at least they can eat the darn stuff. My impossible person is my father-in-law. He has everything. He needs nothing. He tells me nothing that he wants. So I give him gifts that are edible. And the other one is, to me, making your own gifts, edibles in particular, is a gift from the heart. You are pouring something of yourself into your gift that you're sharing. So it's a very meaningful gift, unless you prefer to give a Tim Hortons card, And no, don't get me wrong, I like Tim Hortons cards, but, getting a gift that somebody has made for me is fantastic. So the other one is putting back the fun into the season. As you can imagine where I'm going with this, I want to have some fun this year. I want to always have fun at Christmas time instead of this mad rush. I like to have the fun piece of it. So sometimes if someone has a gift on their list, they might get it in February. All right, but I've had fun during the season. So that's my goal. So and that's only a few of the reasons why we might want to do it. But to me, it's just a ton of fun. So what are edible crafts and gifts? Well, as the name implies, they are made of edibles for the most part. All right, so they are decorations for the home. All right. They can be edibles for the table or the pantry or the refrigerator, whichever you choose, so that you would use at some point in time, either whether it's fairly shortly, if it's a fresh thing, or fairly lengthy if it's not. The other one is for health and wellness. You can make things out of edibles that are safe for your health, for your bathtub, for sedatives, for your sleep, lavender, all sorts of things like that. And I do love the fresh plants and seeds. I often give fresh plants and seeds for gifts these days. So that's another kind of edible gift, so herbs and things like that, absolutely. To me, it's also not just for humans. It could be for the wildlife, for the birds, for the moose, if the moose is coming to visit you. Whatever it might be that is technically a wildlife. Then the other one is goodies for the pets. If I can't think of something to give for somebody, or like my brother, he gets dog biscuits for Murphy, okay? So that works. All right, so once again, just a few ideas of what we can use these for. So when we start thinking edible gifts, the worst thing that you do is on December the 20th, you say, I'm going to do a whole bunch of edible gifts this Christmas. And you have a stress level that's about here. All right, so tips, plan ahead. And one of the biggest things is think about what it is that you're going to make ahead of time. So you don't get trapped into thinking at the last minute, oh, I can make that too. All right, so you make the list, you check it twice, and you knock off half of the things that you're going to say you're going to make. All right, it's like ordering seeds in spring. You always want to do more, okay? So you knock it off. So what you do is you just make that list and you say, okay, I am going to dry oranges for Christmas decorations. All right, so now you know it's going to take a few days to make, and you start planning with that. So, and that to me is one of the biggest things, because I want to make 10 things and I need to make 5. The next one is I make the exact list of what I need for each particular item. Because sometimes you need time over here, here, and here. So you don't want to finish this one and then, oh, now I need time. Out you go to the shops again. Oh, I need time for this one. Out you go to the shops again. So you make the exact list of all the ingredients that you're going to need for all 5 of the things that you're going to make that Christmas. All right. Because if you go small, it can be more expensive than if you buy a big bag. Okay. And so, for instance, I buy dried tomatoes by the bundle, and it's extremely inexpensive when I do it this way, or I make them myself in my dehydrator, rather than going and getting a teeny little bag, which costs you about the same amount as something like this. So it's really helpful. So get your supplies early, because lots of people want to do the edibles, and so you can't find things half the time. All right. So for instance, if you need cinnamon sticks that are this long, you don't want to have to go to somewhere and have to buy them this long or this long. So you shop early and get the quantities that you need, because going back again is going to be a painful thing. And then the next thing I like to do is, when you are making edibles, I always taste test before I bottle, bag, or otherwise, because you might send off something that tastes terrible, and that's not the best thing to do at Christmas Day, sending everybody to the hospital, you know. So we don't want to do that. And if the items are food items that you're going to consume, as opposed to using edibles, say, for decorations, make sure you put labels on if they are anything that's got food sensitivities involved. And that's more and more these days. So I do make sure I put the list of ingredients and things. And even more important than the ingredients, it's the storage. So if I'm making a jam, I got to let people know, okay, it was canned. You're okay to put it on the shelf for 6 months before you eat it. But if I didn't can it, you only got 3 weeks. So you got to let people know that stuff. And once again, know your limits. You can only do so much, all right? That's the mantra of this, okay? It's like saying, oh, I'm going to create a queen-size crochet bedspread on December 15th, okay? Know your limits. Maybe they get a handkerchief, all right? So we can source some things from the outdoors. Mostly they're the natural things like rose hips, which are little vitamin C pills, all right? So you can source all sorts of things like rose hips. You can source the orange berries, sea buckthorn berries, all sorts of things you can source from our outdoors. Things like juniper berries, you can use those. Mountain ash berries for decorations, not for eating. Birds like them. We shouldn't eat them. Cones. So I love doing some pine cones as decorations as well. Even the bits and pieces off of pine trees and spruce trees and things like that. Twigs and branches as well. You can source a fair amount from the outdoors. And that's what I would call more your natural stuff than your edible, as in store-bought. But the other piece that we can do is we can actually source from our own garden. So it could be fruit, apples, for instance, but for us, often they don't last. They don't store that long, especially if they're grown organically. And herbs that you have either dried yourself, or you bring them in and pot them on, and now you've already got a ready-made gift. So this came from my garden, and I've already had 3 or 4 cups of tea. It's lemon balm, and before I give it away, I'm going to chop it down and make it look pretty before I give it away. But lemon balm, for instance, for your teas is a lovely gift to someone who has no idea what they want. All right? And you can also do dried edible flowers. And there are tons and tons and tons of edible flowers that we can harvest and dry, either press them or just let them dry, or you can freeze dry them. Things like rose petals, pansies, elderflowers, geraniums, all sorts of flowers that we have are edible that we can use, put in our teas and things like that. Calendula, which is pot marigold. and then the fresh herbs, which I mentioned. Okay, so we're kind of limited because our growing season's already done. And this year it was done, when was the first really bad snowstorm? September 15th? Yeah, I was coming home from Jasper on October the 1st. So here we are going over the Icefields Highway on all of the snow. Yeah, that one was the real killer. So we need to purchase a lot more of those edibles. I really go after the cranberries, fresh cranberries or dried. Popping corn, for sure. Nuts of all sorts, whether they're the fresh, so really like the almonds, for instance, that come from BC that are all fuzzy and green, or the dried ones that have been around for a little longer. I have a heavy bags full of limes and oranges and grapefruits. Anything citrusy is a really good thing to work with. Pomegranates. They are fun to work with. Spices and dried herbs, loose teas of some sort. Now, I use the word tea very appropriately. Apparently, Benedict Cumberbatch had a little rant on the TV this week, and he said that chamomile tea is not tea. The only thing that is tea is the leaves from a species of tea which is grown in India and Nepal and all those guys. The rest of them are not teas. They're tisanes, all right? So we are going to get lots of different kinds of things that make teas. Vinegars. Usually I have about 3 or 4 different kinds. The white vinegars, apple cider, white wine, red wine, all sorts of different vinegars because you can use them to make different flavored vinegars and different kinds of olive oil. So mostly I use olive oil as opposed to any of the others. Because it lasts better and it absorbs the flavors better. So you can purchase a whole ton of range of things. Lots of dried beans and peas and things like that as well. So lots of things that are in your pantry or you purchase specifically because usually you don't have bags and bags of them. All right. So when we look at decorations for the home, we're talking things like garlands, wreaths, candle holders, tree ornaments, pomanders, potpourri, tabletop decorations, on and on and on. So let's examine a few of them. So garlands. Garlands to me are often on the tree, but you can also string them like this, right? Okay. So one of the traditional ones that's an American one is the popcorn laced in with the cranberries. All right. So that one is one of the traditionals. Me, I find it really fussy to do because I'm always breaking and eating the popcorn. All right, so it's fussy, and then you have to have a nice big darning needle because otherwise if you use a tiny one you put the thing right through your finger, and you have to have a thimble and yada yada. So but if you're into garlands, cranberries and popcorn are the thing to do. But I've also done it with my dried fruit, and I like that, doing a lot easier. You might not use a big guy. You might use the limes and the lemons and things like that. But you can do garlands with dried fruit, and you can, when you've got this, you can just put a string right through the cranberry stick, cinnamon stick. So you can really use a lot of different things. You're not limited just to popcorn. The other one that you can go with is candies. Has anybody ever made a garland made out of dried candy, the hard candies? So the candy's in the middle and you've got the little cracker thing at the end. So you just sort of tie the string around each candy and then you can just do it around. And it can be very glittery because, of course, they always come in foils and things like that. It doesn't have to just be hard candy. It can be the toffees and things like that, as long as it's in a nice shiny wrapper. Okay? So candy ones. Now the good thing about some of the edible garlands, like the popcorn and the cranberries, is you don't want to save them year to year. So what I do is after Christmas, they go outside and the birds eat them. Easy peasy. All right. I like easy cleanup. Wreaths. Now I adore wreaths. What
is that?
A wreath?
Wreath. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I probably went. Oops.
I heard Reese.
Reese. No, not Reese's Pieces. That's Halloween.
Yeah, that's too.
So culinary wreaths can be made out of all sorts of herbs. It can be. This is where you on a wire frame often. you just take the dried herbs that you have dried, so you've harvested in August. All right, so this is where planning comes into play. So you're going to take the bunches of your herbs and just wind them into a wreath, and then you have an edible wreath that way. And you can decorate it with all sorts of things, and you can throw some spices in if you wish to. How about a garlic wreath or a garlic hanging garlic braid, right? That is technically a wreath. The other one that we can use is the dried fruit again, and the dried nuts. We can put them into a wreath, and you just literally eat from the wreath. The one thing about culinary wreaths that are made out of herbs is don't hang it in the kitchen. Because you put your lovely wreath on the kitchen. Well, when you're in the kitchen, you've got tons of oils out there, aromas, this, that, and the other. The dust is falling on it. After a while, you really don't want to eat from that wreath. So I don't put my wreath anywhere close to where the full light, the sunlight coming in from the kitchen, because it will bleach it. So it's usually tucked in a nice corner if I'm going to have an edible wreath, okay? Because you really don't want to it. I also love doing sensory wreaths as well, things that include lavender, rosemary twigs, anything that's a nice aroma that keeps the aroma a fair amount. All right, so tree ornaments, even more so. This is where you can spend hours and hours and hours of fun, and trust me, I've done it. All right, so one of the ones is you make sugar cookies into whatever shape you want, and you can ice them. When you are doing sugar cookies and you're going to hang them in the tree, make sure that when they come out of the oven, you poke a little hole through so that there's room for the string. If you don't, then it's very difficult to go through the cookie without making a mess, and it will often crumble. So when I take them out, I've made lovely little trees or Santas or whatever I want. As soon as they come out of the oven, I've got my little, I use a skewer. And I just go, and I screw it around and just make a nice hole that's big enough for whatever I'm going to use to hold it up. And sometimes you can use ribbon. I often will use raffia. I love raffia for all sorts of things. It's a fairly natural look to it, cheap as can be, and it is a natural product as opposed to plastic or something like that. You can also make your cranberry popcorn balls. This is where I'll use popcorn and cranberries rather than on a garland for me. It's because you can just glom it all together, poke all of the cranberries in together. Make sure you put your hook in first, because when you try and insert your hook into after you've made it, once again, you got a problem. So usually I'll make my little thing like this, have it hanging, and then I glom everything around it, all right? And then let it, once it's set and dried, then this will be, it won't fall off of it. Okay. Once again, the cookies are lovely. Chocolates. We can make chocolates in molds. Make sure that you've got a little hole in there, and then you string them up, and if you want, you can make it kind of glitzy, and you can wrap them up yourself, or you can just leave them as be. And it's kind of neat to do the white chocolate and the dark chocolate together. And what I really like working with is cinnamon bundles. All right, because when you take your cinnamon, and this is where a glue stick is really handy. Hot glue is really handy when you're doing this sort of stuff. So make yourself a nice little log with 3 or 4 cinnamon sticks. You can put things like star anise on them, like that. You can put little pieces of your dried fruit if you want to. I put juniper berries on this. I put cranberries, put rose hips on it, and you can make some really beautiful ornaments for the tree. And what will happen is they'll contribute the smell to the house. So though you may not be cooking, you might have that Christmas smell wafting through the house all the time anyway. So these can be extremely fun with grandkids, kids, mums, dads, grandparents, etc. So I make a lot of these every year. And then at the end of the season, I might take them apart and use them to stir in my mulberry. All right? I don't worry too much about the glue. I figure we absorb enough plastic as it is. A little extra, no big deal. So the other one is the candle holders, because we love candles on Christmas and around. And one of the easiest things to do is you get a big candle holder in a glass, put your candle in the middle, and then around it you can put all sorts of goodies. It can be nuts, it can be fresh fruit, it could be baked goods, it could be anything. It could be the little truffle balls that you can make, the little rum truffle balls. Sky's the limit. But what it does is you've now got nibblies on the table for after the meal is finished and you want some conversation. People just pick away at the candle holder, so to speak. I've even seen it done with little individually wrapped cheeses and things like that. That's kind of fun. All right. So think of your candle holders because they add warmth. But then when there's food around them as well, it just adds a little extra element to it. And you can make them fancy or fairly plain, your choice. Now, one of the interesting things that's been around for a long time is a pomander. And back in medieval times, they would have really fancy ones made out of gold, and they would fill them up with spices. And all the ladies of the court would walk through the streets, which were very smelly, and they would hold up the pomander to their nose. And that was to make it smell better when they were having to mix with the common people. All right? Because no one washed, right? And apparently all their fancy clothes, their silks and velvets, they never washed those either because they were too expensive, right? Couldn't wash them. So you'd wear them year after year and no one would ever wash them. So you would need a pomander. All right? Yes, exactly. The thoughts we find. But we can make our own. And one of the easiest things to do is you take a nice orange and then make a design and stick little clove pieces, the dried cloves, in and make a design. And then what you do is wrap it up in ribbon, hang it on for your tree or wherever, and you'll have that lovely smell of orange and clove or lemon and clove. And the clove will preserve the fruit. You'd think, oh, it's going to go all moldy. No, it doesn't. And what happens is the cloves itself are the preservative, and then they slowly will shrink, and at the point that you decide, well, it's done its job, out it goes into the snow, and somebody will eat it for sure. All right? But you can also make papori, and papori can be made out of anything. This is my little box of tricks. This is where your natural things from the outdoors can come into play, because you can have your cones and make a sort of a wintry smell. All sorts of berries can go into it, or you can go into a floral one, and what you can have is things like calendula petals, which have got nice spicy. Here's your dried rose petals. All right, very fancy. You can go with lemon balm. Okay, so dried lemon balm can be very, very interesting in a potpourri. One of the biggest ones for me is my lavender. All right, your botanical lavender, and it's collecting all those little flower buds. Now, I must confess, I never collect my own lavender. All right, it's too painstaking for me. I'll go and buy a little bag of it. There's a couple of stores in town where you can order it, or online. One of the things I like doing as well, you can have a sort of an outdoorsy, wintry kind of potpourri. You can have a fruity one. You can have a spicy one. And spicy one's really good with peppers, so dried peppers can go in that. And you get that spice that goes with it. So any of the peppers that are spicy. And then I have some orange peel sometimes that I'll put into it. You can dry your own. One of the best things to own if you're going to make edibles that are for gifts is a dehydrator. All right, very easy. You can use the oven if you want to, but with a dehydrator you can just turn it and let it go, and you can let it go while you're sleeping, whereas an oven you kind of don't want to do that. When you're doing a potpourri, one of the best things to use is something called orris. And orris, I was reading about just recently, is it is the powdered root of a lily, and it primarily comes from the Mediterranean, so it's quite expensive. It takes a lot of lilies to make a bit of orris, but orris is a fixative. So if you make your potpourri and you put a little bit of orris powder into it, then it will keep the smells more intense longer. And if your potpourri is starting to get a little bit less than it should be, you can use your botanical oils. So you can go and get a ton of different ones. whether they're the citrusy ones, the outdoorsy ones, the fruity ones, your choice. They'll come in sometimes into a little bottle like this, and one bottle will last you for years. Okay, and the ladies here in the room are smelling some of these aromas already coming out. All right, so you can. So when you're not using it, and as you can tell, I have a little supply. I always keep it in an airtight or reasonably airtight container, and keep it downstairs or in a closet where it's quite cool and dry, because you don't want them to cook in the summertime, so to speak. Nor should they be in the light, because then they will bleach out the colors. You can imagine with this stuff, if you left it out in the sunlight when you're not using it, it would just be, no color at all. Whereas now we've got this lovely orangey color already still, and so the petals are there. And so I keep them in a nice little tub like this, and I keep mine in a dresser drawer downstairs, and it's available for me to use. All right, and this is where you can gussy up your potpourri as well. If you've got a spicy one, you can put in twigs of cinnamon. You can put your citrus in back again. You can really add little extras so it looks more robust, but the smells of it is coming from the smaller materials often. All right, so, and we kind of forgot about potpourri for a while, and it's coming back again, isn't it? And the smell of potpourri, as opposed to Glade, is subtle. It's different, all right? You go into a house with Glade and you say, oh, gee, that was lemon scent Glade, right? Potpourri's got more complexity to it. All right. I don't know who here has done a gingerbread house. Okay, gingerbread house, it's an American tradition as opposed to a European tradition. But making your little gingerbread house is always just a ton of fun. And I've got to the point where I make my own gingerbread rather than buying it. And this is something, if you make it ahead, it will last a long, long time. So if you decide one rainy day in September to make your gingerbread, go right ahead and do it. Now it's ready for you. I do advise when you bake it, then it's when it's kind of soft, cut it into the shapes that you're going to need, because trying to cut into dry, crisp gingerbread is not a successful thing. Popcorn snowmen with kids is just a ton of fun. One of the things I've learned over the years is that I always have disposable gloves when I'm doing the popcorn snowmen, even for the kids, because getting that gooey stuff, the marshmallow all over your fingers, they tend to not like that. But you can make your popcorn snowmen, you can make your popcorn Rudolphs, you can make whatever you wish, and then you get to eat it, of course. Especially the kids, they'll do this, they'll eat it off, so you get a double dose. All right, so you can do all sorts of edibles with not even the baking, but the other bits and pieces, and make them for your edibles. Now, to me, that's the fun part. But where I really go crazy is what I call it for the table and pantry. And this involves things like all of the preserves that we can do. It's traditional treats, all right? For me, one of my traditional treats is shortbread, all right? Gotta make, and it's not Canadian shortbread, it's Scots shortbread, okay? You can do your herbal vinegars and oils, your savory treats. You can do seasonings and drink mixes and recipes in a jar and teas and tonics, and the list goes on and on and on. I've even now started to make soups, and I'll freeze them, and those are gifts for people like my daughter or my father-in-law, because getting a vat or a nice big tub of my soup is a gift for them. They really appreciate that. So you don't have to limit yourself to the stuff that you might see at Sunterra. So let's talk about preserves. Preserves can be anything where we are taking the fruit and we are cooking it, use the word cooking loosely, to be in a form which it will last a fairly long time. It's usually an accompaniment to a dinner or breakfast or a dessert tray versus a main course. So it could be your chutneys, it can be your relishes, it can be jams and jellies, it can be your butters, which are essentially when you've taken the produce and really cooked it down to a paste. That's called a butter. And I do a fair amount of that. But I limit myself to one thing out of that list each year, all right? So I'm not going to make raspberry jam and strawberry jam and ginger jam and this jam because I won't get there, all right? So one of the things I really started to do a little while ago was no-cook jams. The one thing about no-cook versus cooked jams and jellies is you're using more sugar, all right? Because the sugar then becomes the preservative, but the convenience outweighs the sugar content, all right, in my mind at any rate. So, and when I'm making a jam as a gift, I don't do raspberry jam because you can go to the store and buy raspberry jam, right? Mind you, your own good cooked raspberry jam is pretty special, but I like doing really neat ones. Ginger jam, for instance, the full-on marmalades. And recently, I've started making jams out of vegetables. So one of the things I love is garlic jam. Have you ever done that one? Garlic jam is a lot of fun. And it, open that jar and the whole house is now garlic. All right? So I'm not sure if we would open that on Christmas Day, but it's a really pungent one. Or onion jam, okay? But one of my favorites these days is pumpkin jam. And guess what we've had a lot of recently is pumpkin jam. So pumpkin jam is literally your pumpkin, and usually it's best to cook your pumpkin out of a non-carved, non-smoked up with a candle and non-frozen afterwards pumpkin, okay? So I'll always buy a couple of extra. I used to just buy the sugar pumpkins, the ones that are bred to be a different taste for the pies and things like that versus the Halloween. But these days I just use a Halloween pumpkin, all right? And what you do is you have your cooked pumpkin, and when I do pumpkin cooking, I just will carve it out. And one of the best tools to get out the guts and seeds out of a pumpkin comes from Dollarama. It's like a claw, and it just pulls out the seeds and the extra flesh just like nobody's business. But only before Halloween can you find one of those. So you have your cooked pumpkin. You've had lots of sugar in it. Now the secret for this one is mandarin oranges. Okay, some cinnamon and some caramel sauce. It's pretty special. And then you cook it up for about 10 minutes. And this one has made a pretty decent recipe. All right, so it's a lovely color, isn't it? It's gorgeous color. And then once you've got it, and then you can use all sorts of jars. And all through the year, I collect jars. All right? Who knows what was in this to begin with, but that's a pretty fancy jar. Or you can use your mason jars. And to get them clean, what I do is I run them through the dishwasher. When I'm doing full-on cooked preserving, I'll sterilize the jars in the canner. But if it's the refrigerator kind, then I will use just the dishwasher ones. So this is a handy tool, guys, because I always make a mistake. And so you've just stirred this, and let's stir it around a bit. And this one actually has the liquid pectin. And you'll find that in many of the recipes for the no-cook jam, that you're using liquid pectin. It is more effective, whereas the dried pectin is better for your cooked jams. Oh well, I'm going to make a mess on my tablecloth. And then you literally will just pour this in. And you can tell it's quite liquidy, but it will set over time. And then you have a nice little jar. Now, that's pretty plain Jane. Oh, you need a nice little label, all right? Often my label is a Sharpie, all right? Okay, but you can make your own fancy labels. And then you can decorate it quite easily. One of the things that's easy to do for decorating is a little piece of cloth over top. But I'm very much in love with my raffia. And so I just tie a nice little bow. If I could tie a bow tonight, that would be good.
You don't have any tasting sticks, do you?
No, I don't. That's kind of silly of me. I should have brought in a whole bunch of... There, so that looks kind of neat and tidy. All right, cut that off, except I forgot my scissors. So things like this in someone's stocking with a label that says, use me within 2 weeks, keep me in the refrigerator, is a really nice little stocking stuffer. Or if you've made 4 or 5 different ones, then you've got yourself a nice main gift to give to somebody, and they'll use them. All right, so now pop that to one side. No, I'm not. Tastes good. All right. The other one that I thought we could make today is a mustard. And I love mustards because my husband likes French's mustard. All right. It's yellow, right? And he loves this stuff. I can't stand it. All right. So I make my own mustards. So this one I pre-measured. And one of the best things for a mustard is one of the magic bullet or any variation on a theme, because you can get a nice little mix. And with this pumpkin jam as well, I did a little bit of the immersion to get the mandarin oranges so that they weren't big chunks. But you can leave it in chunks if you want to. Depends the consistency that you want. So with this guy, what I've done is I've got some honey, I've got some vinegar in it, I've got some mustard seed, very inexpensive, and some dried mustard. And you'll notice I don't buy them in little things that tell me what they are. It's just little baggies worth of stuff, okay? Much, much easier and cheaper. And then once again, the honey, you can either get just ordinary liquid honey, or if you wish to, you could also use honey that you purchased from a local place, such as Chinook honey, all right? Which I often do because it's marvelous stuff. And let's see if I can make this work. Just puree the heck out of it. Before I had one of these, it was kind of messy because you're trying to do it by hand. Forget it. All right. And then I put it in another cute jar. Okay. And when you're doing mustards, like your jams, you can go with a bigger jar, but I usually don't have a big 500 milliliter jar. I have a smaller jar. Then with this one, I go even smaller. And most of the mustards I like to make, they're quite grainy. So you can put all sorts of different things in them. There we go. And this will keep, because it's vinegar, this is going to keep in your refrigerator anything up to a year, by the way. Because we don't have sugars, we don't have fruits, we have the vinegar as well as the honey, which is a preservative. All right, and it will slowly solidify, and you have a very nice little jar of mustard. Now, if you're going to buy this mustard from a specialty store or Hickory Farm, all right, it'll be about $5-6. Okay, so I guess one of the reasons to do edible gifts is also because they're inexpensive. All right, you're investing your time, and you can make a nice little label, put a little star on top if you want to, like this, make it all pretty, or you can go plain Jane, especially if it's midnight on the 24th, okay? All right, so, and you can see how easy that was. It really takes no time at all to make mustards. It's just deciding on your recipe and having everything assembled and be ready. And, oh, another tip, don't do more than one thing at once, because otherwise you're going to put the mustard in with the jam, all right? Not a good idea. Okay, so chutneys take longer, okay, because you're boiling it down, okay? But I love making a chutney because it's got things like your onions, it's got your fruit, it can be anything, all right? But you're boiling it down so it's a thicker consistency. And recently, in the Herald, Julie Van Rosendahl had recipes about quince. Now, quince comes from my childhood because they can grow quince in England, and my grandmother loved quince jam.
And back in Ontario too.
Yes. Now, quince are beautiful because they've got these lovely floral notes, and you can put quince in your house and it smells this lovely floral as they ripen. And it lasts a long, long time. So it's a natural pomander, so to speak. But you don't eat a quince, chomp, 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 all right? Awful. So you can cook it. And so for me, when I cook quince, usually I just poach it and then I can decorate cakes with it or whatever I might do with it. But Julie was talking about a quince paste, and that's where you take your quince, and it, by the way, when you cook quince, it becomes this lovely, either a rosy pink, reddish color or an orangey apricot color. It's gorgeous color. And what you do is you have sugar, a little bit of water, and your quince fruit, and you boil it down to the consistency of a paste. And then put it into your little jars or into little ramekins or whatever you might want to do. And then it's so solid, you can cut it like a soft cheese. And can you imagine that on a charcuterie board? So I'm off to buy some quince this year. All right. So you can always find new ideas, all right? New traditions. Pickles. I make the old-fashioned pickles. It's escaped my mind.
Dill.
No, not dill. I make those too. The ones with the little pearl onions.
Gherkins?
Nope. Oh, blast it. They've got malt vinegar, little onions, and so they're malted pickled onions, basically. Pickled onions, all right? So you can do pickles as well. So you've got your dills, absolutely. How about pickled beets? How about pickled carrots? How about pickled onions, which is one of my family favorites. My brother's Christmas is not at all successful if I don't give him a jar of pickled onions, all right? Because he's very bread. Okay, so he wants that. So think of the pickles that you can make. You can make the bread and butter pickles. You can make all sorts of pickles, and they can be part of your gift as well. All right. With me, one of the other things is my traditional treats. Now, I am an old-fashioned lady, and when I got married, God knows how many decades ago, I had fruitcake for my wedding cake. All right. I understand that Megan had a really fancy elderflower one, but I had fruitcake. And as I mentioned before, Christmas is not Christmas without fruitcake with royal icing on top. All right? So there's that one. But there's probably other cakes that would be your traditions as well. There's also plum pudding, which is another very, very British tradition. But there's a lot of Germanic traditions, Swedish traditions, etc. So you can look back at your heritage and resurrect any of those traditions that you might have let fall away. And it brings back your culture, your heritage. You might teach your children and the extended family a little bit about your family heritage as well. I love making shortbread. And it's not the whipped shortbread, it's the dense Scots shortbread. All right, but there's other ones. My mum had an Marigold bar, which was her adopted traditional flavor. And so we only ever made an Marigold bar at Christmas time, okay? But it could be anything. And granola. How about granola? Who likes granola? You know, make your own. Various recipes, all sorts of things can get thrown into the mix. So you can have all sorts of that type of cooked traditional things. Okay. Now, one of the other ones that I like making, and we're not going to demo that tonight, but is your herbal oils and your herbal vinegars. And there's many different ways to make them. There's the cold methods and then there's the hot methods. I prefer the cold because it's less fuss, but you have to use it faster. And one of the easiest way with oils is that you use your good quality olive oil. You're going to put your herbs into it, let them infuse for a few days, take out and when I do that, I don't put my herbs just in the oil like this. I'll put it in a cheesecloth or a muslin bag or something like that. So because they'll disintegrate quite quickly, and so you don't want this mush in the oil. Then you take the oil, the herbs out of the oil, and then when you give it, you might want to just put a little twig in, if you see what I mean, just for accent. If you're going to use the oils, I recommend that they be used within a month. And be very careful of them because you're not cooking the oils, then they could get some bacteria growing. So I'm a little leery of oils, but the herbal vinegars I love doing. So this is where your various vinegars will come into play. Your white vinegars, your white wine vinegars, your rice wine. I use rice wine a lot these days because it's a softer vinegar. And you can put your herbs into it. You can put your peppers into it. You can do all sorts of things to gently infuse the vinegar with the flavors of the whichever it is that you're putting in. Once again, you're going to use that within 3 months. All right. Whatever you put in your herb tends to not disintegrate because the vinegar itself is a preservative. So I make little bottles. So you're not going to make a bottle that's this big because, 2 years from now, you're still trying to get through it. All right. I like little bottles. All right. They're meant to be fun, not a chore. Okay. So that's one thing to get into it. And once again, we were talking about the pickles as a savory treat because we get so much sweet over the Christmas season, over the festive season. So savory treats are often very welcome. So lots for sure. The pickles, this comes into play. But how about marinating cheese? We tend not to do that, but it can be very, very interesting. Or you can just take a cheese, put the goodies on the outside, such as nuts and things like that. I like putting peppers in oil. So you can either start with your peppers that are the fresh ones, but I also will dry my peppers, and I will use these as well. So dried peppers are a wonderful thing. Quite easy to dry in a dehydrator. You can use them for decorations in a culinary wreath, but you can also put them in oils if you wish to. And they're very, very versatile. And by the way, the seeds inside these are very viable. So this is a seed packet. Okay? All right. Then we can talk about the herb and the wine jellies. So that's usually using your grapes and things like that. It could be your peppers. It could be all sorts of things which you're distilling down into your jellies. And I like antipasto. Anybody made antipasto? The best way to make antipasto was with 10 other ladies. All right? Because each lady or gentleman has one chore. So one person's chopping the cauliflower, one person's doing this, and this one, and this one, and this one, and then you put it together in a big vat, and then you distribute it. Okay? You can sterilize the antipasto, or if it's going to be used within a couple of weeks, you don't need to do that, and here's your gift. And it tastes so much better than store-bought. All right? And lately, I've been getting into fermented foods, so sauerkraut. All right, your own homemade.
That's good.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because most of the sauerkraut that we buy in the stores is pickled, as in it's vinegar, whereas your true sauerkraut is fermented by the natural bacteria. There is no vinegar in it, and it's got all these subtle tastes in it. So definitely worth trying. Okay. So one of the other things that we can do is we can make drinks. So we could make your mulling spices, okay, for wine or for apples juice. You can also make hot chocolate, different types of hot chocolate mixtures if you want to. Chai teas, because chai tea isn't just one type. So chai tea is your black tea with all sorts of different spices into it, and I like my chai tea. And wassail bowl, if you're going to be English about that. But think of all the different drinks that you can make. And you can put everything together, put it in a nice jar, and you've got a lovely gift. The other ones that I go with are your herbs. And I like making different kinds of herb mixtures. So we all know Italian herbs, right? Okay, you dump a whole bunch of oregano and thyme and red pepper and this, that, and the other, and you make your own Italian herb. But one of my favorites is herb de Provence. And this one uses, and this one is the traditional one. So what you do is you start off with dried rosemary. Now my son calls dried rosemary pine needles. And he says, you gone and put pine needles in the food again. And I go, okay, yes, I'm guilty of it. But you want nice fresh ones, not the powdered kind, and not stuff that you found in the back of your spice cupboard that you haven't used in 30 years. I found a bottle of dried rosemary back in my spice cupboard a while ago, and the label on it said Woodwards. Yeah. Well, there really wasn't much flavor to this. It was sort of brown dust, okay? So when you're making a herb mix, you're not rummaging around in your spice cupboard. It should be fresh spices, freshly bought spices. So you put in some rosemary. By the way, I kept the bottle because, it reminds me. I figure when I'm dead, it'll still be there. Okay. Then the next, so we've got our rosemary, and then we're going to put some basil in here. And I got my husband to do this one, and of course, what did he not do?
Label them.
Label them. Okay, basil. And the good thing about this, it's not basil, this is thyme. If you forget an ingredient, just don't tell them. Okay. Now, often I'll go to places like Bulk Barn, but if you want to, you can go to places like Silk Road, and Silk Road has really good quality herbs as well. And so this one is savory.
Are you doing 1 tablespoon of each?
Yep. So far 1 tablespoon. And some oregano for fun. He did put an O on oregano. Bingo. He says it looks like the others. And I says, yeah, well, they all look like the others. Dimwit. No, I shouldn't have said that because he did it for me. So I'm not going to say dimwit. But I went, really? I better
Just
not
take it as a compliment. He thinks you're the expert, and you'll know.
Yeah, I just have to poke my nose in it, and I'm gonna know, right? Here's my time. Don't need time. Yes, I do need time. Time's already in there.
Time's in there already.
Thank you. It's late. Bedtime. As you get older, you realize that, like bedtime was 1 o'clock when you were younger, then it was 11, then it was 10, then it's 9, now it's 7 o'clock. Oh, how long do I have to wait up, right? And then you have your lavender. Lavender is the essentially agreed. Yes. All right. But you can vary it. This one is faintly I would call this one to be a pretty classic one. Stir it all around. And then I put it in, guess what? An old spice jar.
That doesn't say Woodwards.
That doesn't say Woodwards. There we go. So your funnels are really helpful when you do this. And you just tip it in and hopefully not make a mess. I'll get a little smarter about this and do this. There we go. I'm going to use the bigger one. And when you're doing this, by the way, your house smells wonderful. It really does. Ha ha ha. Okay. Go in. Sometimes I put pink peppercorns in with my herb de Provence because it makes it look very pretty. Okay. And see, that just makes about half a jar. So you can double and triple your recipe as you wish to. These will last about 6 months. Most of the herbs that we buy, we tend to buy a big bag and put them in our closet. And then we use them in 2 years. Actually, most herbs we should use within 3 to 6 months. And especially if you're drying your own ones, because we're not using fixatives. So when you are making them, don't put it in this. put it in small little testers, all right? So that people can use them within 6 months and then they get the benefit of them. Don't do Woodwards, okay? Always have a Woodwards handy for you. All right. So you can also do dry rubs. My son likes dry rubs, so I make him dry rubs. Now, most of the herb mixtures are the greens. Dry rubs are often the powdered ones like paprika, garlic powder, the sort of the what I call the spectrum of yellow, orange, red, that type of stuff. And you just literally make them, but they're in a consistency that they would just put it on the meat. It's a dry rub. So the only difference really is the consistency of it, because the rubs are often a finer texture than your herbs themselves. But once again, use within 6 months for sure. Now, I really have a ton of fun with this. Recipes in a jar. And many years ago, it was extremely popular, right? So then they became passé because we'd been there and we'd done that, right? Well, I've revisited them because I'm finding more and more people don't have the time, desire, whatever, to make their own soups. But nor do I want them to have more soups. So I like to give them a prepared soup. So I've gone back and I've started to redo those. This one happens to be a lentil soup. So I really go after the ones with lots of beans and things like that because we don't have enough of that in our world. Now, usually I don't go to the extent of pre-bagging. Where are you, Barley? Here, Barley. Barley. All right. And the idea when you're doing a soup and a recipe in a jar is you have lovely little layers, right? So this one is a recipe in a jar, but it's not a layered one. This one I bought because it was a fundraiser, and this is your raspberry white chocolate raspberry scones. All right. So this one was by the Youth Central. So they're using these as a fundraiser now. But the idea is with a jar, with a layered thing, you are literally putting all of the dried ingredients into your jar. So this one we started off with barley, and then we're going to put some green split peas. Now I tend to follow the recipes fairly closely, because one day I went, oh phooey, I don't need to follow a recipe. So I went and put a whole ton of lentils in. Well, I didn't have soup, I had gumbo. All right, stew, in fact. So the other one that is good to put in is some sort of seasoning. So either vegetable, beef, or chicken. This one I've used chicken. Okay. And then I'm adding some lentils. Now lentils, you could use the red stuff, you can use the green ones, but I kind of like the red ones because it makes a nice color in the cooked soup and also in the jar itself. And if you're having a party doing one of these, make sure everybody knows the measuring cups, okay? Because I did once with a bunch of teenagers and they didn't know the difference. And it was quite funny. Okay. No worries.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Very good.
Have fun.
Thank you, I will.
Come on, how am I doing
Inspired.
But that's the idea. There we go. Then a whole bunch of minced onion. All right, minced onion is always excellent. You can also put garlic powder in here as well if you wish to. Okay. Then we're going to add some parsley. Where's my parsley? Here, parsley. And what I really like using is my own dried parsley. It's got a nice bright green to it to add into the mix. And then we're going to add some seasonings. And this one, we're putting some Italian seasoning and some red and some black pepper into the mix. How am I doing for time? Ooh, doing well. Okay. Then let's put some peas on top. Oh, and I did put some garlic powder in as well. And then you put some peas on top.
Is this your own recipe, or did you get this?
This is one that I've amended. How about that? Okay, because I didn't like the first one, so I've changed it up a bit. So it's got a little less of the lentils and a little more of the peas. And I don't have beans in this particular one. So you can see how pretty it gets. Now the next ingredient is my dried tomatoes.
Where do you buy those?
These ones I purchased from DJ Market. Does anybody know about DJ Market?
No.
DJ Market is in Calgary. It's off 46th Avenue and Blackfoot Trail, near the food bank, if anybody knows the food bank there.
Oh, yes.
And it's like a fruit market in BC, except it's run by a very lovely Vietnamese family. And they have lots and lots of fresh local food. In fact, they spend time planting with their farmers so that they know the quality. And she does a lot of drying of things, peppers, apples, pears, tomatoes, all sorts of things as well. So it's an excellent place to get a really good quality. And I like to put a fair chunk of these in here. Oops, I should leave room for a bag of pasta. Now, when you put if you add pasta into the mix, you should always put it in your jar in a little baggie. You don't want it mixed in because you want to pre-cook this. So any ingredient that's pre-cooked, for instance, rice, pasta, things like that, you want to have it separate, and usually at the top, not the bottom. And then you just fit it in. In. Okay. Sometimes you do this. I might have to take out a couple of my little dudes. And the idea is it's full to the very top, and if your baggie has got a bit of air in it, you just open it up a little bit so that it fits in. And there you've got a very, very pretty jar. All right? Something like this, your daughter, your father-in-law, whatever, can leave that on their shelf, and then when they feel like making a soup, all they have to do is take this out, dump everything to a pot, add some broth, and off they go. It's really a lot of fun. And so there's all sorts of variations on themes. Most of them are either bean, lentil, or pea type things. But to me, the key is the good quality of what you're putting in there and the extra, the dried ones. Sometimes I'll put peppers in there, all sorts of different things. Okay? So you can have a lot of fun with these. So cookie and muffin mixes like this, your soup mixes, your dried mix. I've done all different kinds. All right? As long as it's a dry ingredient, that's the key. All right. We can make our own teas and tonics. So this is where I make my own ones. So I like chamomile tea, okay, but I don't like calm, all right, from Celestial Tea or wherever. So I'll take and you can get the ingredients from a lot of good quality stores. You get the chamomile buds. You can add in any other ones that you want to, some mint perhaps, whatever you want. Sometimes I'll make the little mixture, put it in a couple of bags, and then I'll attach a lemon to it. So now you've got the lemon to go with your chamomile tea or the mint or whatever it is. That can be a really nice little gift that you're going to be giving out. So it's not really teas because you're not using black tea, but you can make black teas. So you just get your loose black tea, and then you can add all sorts of things like your hibiscus and things like that, rose hips, and you get a really nice drink for yourself. And mostly, unless you're using the black tea, it's caffeine free, which is rather nice too. I like handing out my fresh herbs, all right, because my grow lights up. I like handing out microgreen kits. Anybody here grow microgreens? easy to do. So literally I just put together a tin or a container, a mat for it to be grown on, and the seeds and a little bit of instructions. It takes a couple dollars, a few minutes, and now you're handing out a kit to somebody for them to try. I hand out my seeds. So for instance, these are from my pumpkins. So I've taken the seeds out, I've dried them, and now these are ready for somebody to either roast, to have roasted seeds, or to plant next year. And so I'll hand out my seeds all the time, and you can put them in nice fancy packages that you make your own, or you can just hand them out like this with a ribbon on it. All right, depends on how fancy you want to get. I love making things for the birds. All right, so pine cone bird feeders. So this is where I go and I collect the ponderosa pines. I go and collect spruce cones, but you want a cone that's got lots of room to stuff things in. The recipes can be varied. You can use lard, or you can use suet, you can use peanut butter, and then you have birdseed, and you just pack the heck this thing full of pine cone, full of the birdseed, mush it together, and then I put it in the fridge so it's nice and cool. And then, tie a little string around the top of the cone so there's a place to hang it. And you can hand these out like crazy. Now, one afternoon, I really got busy with these things. So I'd make one and I'd put it outside. And then I'd come in and I'd make another one, and then I'd put it outside and the other one was empty. And I think I spent the whole afternoon just putting these things out, and they were all gone. Birds love these things. You can also make apple balls, where you take an apple and you stud it with all sorts of things for the birds. You can make your suet feeders if you wish to. You can make garlands, especially for these guys, peanut garlands. And then you hang them where the squirrels can't quite get to them. Hours and hours of fun for you. All right? Okay. Dried sunflower heads, okay? Assuming said squirrels don't swipe them ahead of time, and then you can just dry them, and now they are a bird feeder that you can just make nice and dressed up, and then the birds can have them. Do you know why the squirrels were going after the pumpkins this year, by the way? I found out because I make arrangements, and I had this lovely urn with these nice mini pumpkins in them. And I go around, and I come back the next day, and half the pumpkins were disappeared, and the other half were chomped. Well, apparently the trees, it was so hot and smoky, the trees didn't produce enough seeds. So the poor squirrels are starving to death. And I went, sucks to be them. But I was a little annoyed. But, so, because I put in my time. But that's why they were after all, and that's why they're after the sunflowers these days. Yeah, because the squirrels will get them. No matter what you do, you make double, because the squirrels will get half, at least. Okay? So the inside puppies and cats and things like that. So you can make dog biscuits, all right? And if you want, you can shape them into nice little dog bones. You can get them from Michael's, the little forms. You can use catnip for cats. I'm not so fond about catnip for cats because I am a cat owner, and I had a catnip plant. Well, those poor little cats were going absolutely berserko for it. So if you can grow catnip, do it somewhere where they can't get to it outside. Oh, by the way, if you do it outside, you get every cat in the neighborhood in the garden. And then I dry the catnip rather than trying to have it fresh indoors, all right? But you can make nice little catnip plants if you wish to for your cats. I haven't done any food for the cats, just catnips. But also honeysuckle if you got an old honeysuckle, cut little cookies off of it. Cats adore honeysuckle, all right? So when you're packaging all your gifts, you can go plain Jane, or you can get a little carried away and you put top on. But I also think about, what am I going to package these in? Because some of these things can be more expensive, the package, than the items inside. So a mason jar is really pretty, all right? But it costs about $1 or so. But what about Classico spaghetti sauce? Okay, all right, so collect jars, collect berry baskets, collect clamshells, because those are effective containers and they don't cost you anything. Just have to keep them somewhere where people don't chuck them out. Okay, I love using the transparent cellophane to make it, you have a nice little basket and you wrap it up. That can be nice too. Raffia is one of my go-tos always. Sometimes I'll put things in coffee cups. All right, so the container is something usable like a coffee cup or a casserole dish or something like that. And that way they've got something to use year round. And as well, serving plates, platters, things like that, and baskets. I collect baskets all the time. And if you want ideas, if you're looking for more ideas, when we're in the library, libraries have got lots of idea books. One of my favorites is something called An Edible Christmas. It's an old book, jams and jellies in 30 minutes or less. That's where the pumpkin jam comes from. But if just on the search for the library, put in edible gifts, put in edible Christmas gifts, put in herbal oils and vinegars, jams and jelly, preserves, all of those name searches, and you'll come up with a ton of ideas. And then you'll adapt the ones that you would like. All right? And thank you very much. I think that does it. So does that give everybody a bunch of ideas? All right. Does anyone have any questions?
What would you use garlic jam for?
Oh, as a savory. I can put garlic jam on bread and then toast it. You can have it on the side. I have somebody who literally, cracker, piece of meat, piece of cheese, a little garlic jam. Okay. Mind you, he's the sort of person, I'll give him the tops of the garlic, if you forget to take the heads off, and those are his breath mints. So you choose it wisely. But often garlic jam is in place of, say, minced garlic or something like that. But it can be just a nice little dip. All right. Okay. Any other questions? But really, it's a matter of getting your own traditions and having some fun with them. And then make sure you don't do the same thing always every year, okay? I was a chocolate bark person for a long time. I'm so fed up with chocolate bark. Okay? All right. Thank you very, very much.